Katherine thought she had lost everything. Her daughter vanished during a family cruise, her husband never came back, and for 7 long years, no one believed the truth. But what if the disappearance wasn't an accident? What if the danger came from inside the very ship that promised them safety? When a call from across the world hints that her daughter might still be alive, Katherine boards a plane with nothing but hope and a name almost forgotten. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could prepare her for the truth she's about to uncover. This isn't just a story of a mother's search. It's a journey into corruption, survival, and a daughter who was never meant to be found again. Stay until the end, because once you hear the name behind it all, you'll never look at safety the same way again. Now tell us, from where in the world are you watching this story? Katherine, we're closing now, the store clerk said softly as he approached the entrance, watching her tape another missing poster to the glass window. She didn't respond immediately. Her eyes were fixed on the image of her husband and daughter, their smiles frozen in time. The woman looked older than her years, her face pale and drawn from years of sleepless nights and endless searching. She pressed the tape firmly against the glass before turning slowly. "I'm sorry, I'll leave," she said in a hoarse voice, clutching her worn folder filled with copies of the same poster. The clerk didn't press further. People in the neighborhood knew her, or at least they thought they did. Every few weeks, she walked the same route through Coral Gables, plastering the same photographs, handing out the same leaflets, refusing to let time silence her story. But this time felt heavier. Just that morning, she'd gotten the call. The detective assigned to her case told her what she already feared. The investigation into the disappearance of Ethan and Lucy Wilson was being archived. 7 years, no leads, no witnesses, no closure. Just the vast, echoing absence of a father and daughter who had vanished in paradise. "I don't understand," she whispered to herself as she walked toward her car parked near the canal. "How can they just close it? Just like that?" Her hands trembled as she tried to insert the key, her voice rising with the panic that had never really left. A woman walking her. Dog glanced in her direction, but quickly looked away. Katherine sat inside the car and didn't start the engine. Instead, she stared at the folder on the passenger seat. Each photo inside had been reprinted so many times that the colors had faded. Ethan's blue shirt, Lucy's yellow hair bow, now looked like ghosts in sun-bleached ink. Her mind slipped into a memory, uninvited but all-consuming. The flashback hit with brutal force. Ethan laughing at a joke Lucy had made, both of them standing in line for coffee at the port in Curaçao. Katherine had stepped away for just 5 minutes, just to buy a souvenir magnet for her sister. When she came back, they were gone. No struggle, no scream, just 2 untouched iced coffees growing warm in the Caribbean sun. The authorities on the island had been polite, but indifferent. "It's likely they wandered off," one officer said. "Maybe took a cab for a quick tour." But the hours passed, then the day ended, and no cab driver remembered picking up a man and a young girl. Katherine had retraced every step. The cruise ship's security footage showed nothing but her boarding alone again, hysterical, dragging 2 crew members back onto the pier in a desperate search. Over the following weeks, she remained on the island, exhausting every option. Hospitals, morgues, boat rentals, beach patrols. She paid divers to search the coastline, bribed locals for any whisper of information. But Curaçao swallowed her husband and child like a stone tossed into the sea. By the time she returned to the US, her savings were gone, her job lost, her home half empty. What remained was a ritual she repeated like breathing, searching, posting, asking, remembering. Back in the present, she pulled into her driveway and sat in the car with the headlights off. She didn't want to face the silence inside the house. Every corner still held traces of them. Lucy's drawing of a seahorse taped to the fridge, Ethan's old tennis racket in the garage. Inside, the answering machine blinked. One message. She pressed play with robotic movement. It was the detective again. His voice was calm, professional. Ms. Wilson, as discussed earlier, your case will be officially archived as of next week. If any new evidence arises, it can be reopened. We thank you for your cooperation. She hit delete. There was nothing cooperative about giving up. Katherine walked to the living room and pulled out the shoebox from beneath the couch. Inside were receipts, old notes, GPS coordinates, printouts of Reddit theories. She had memorized every detail of that morning in Curacao, yet she reopened the box each night as if a new answer might magically appear. A knock at the door startled her. It was almost 11 p.m. Cautiously, she peered through the peephole but saw no one. Just as she was about to walk away, she noticed something on the welcome mat, a folded piece of paper. Her heartbeat quickened. She opened the door slowly, stepped outside and picked up the note. It was typed. No signature, no explanation, just 3 lines. You're not crazy. Don't stop. Start with the cafe. Her hands trembled as she reread the message. The cafe? The same one at the port in Curacao where they vanished? It had been one of the few places with working security cameras. She had begged the cafe owner to release the footage, but by the time the police followed up, the drive had already been erased. Could this note be real? Or was it another cruel trick played by someone obsessed with her case? She sat on the edge of her couch, staring at the note like it was a live wire. Part of her wanted to dismiss it. Anonymous tips were nothing new. Over the years, she'd received countless hoaxes, people claiming they'd seen a blonde girl in Brazil, a man matching Ethan's description working in a gas station in Arizona. All led to dead ends. But something about this felt different. It wasn't a lead sent to her inbox or posted under a photo. It had been delivered, hand-delivered. That meant someone knew where she lived. Someone had taken the time to find her, to leave this message without being seen. Her mind raced with possibilities. Could this person be afraid to speak directly? Or were they playing with her again? Still, the final line echoed in her head like a mantra. Don't stop. She wouldn't. Not now. She pulled up her laptop and opened her old files. The cafe's name was still there. Café Del Mar, tucked into the harbor's commercial strip. Her notes reminded her that the barista on duty that morning had been a young woman named Yareli, fluent in Dutch, Spanish, and English, friendly, efficient, and later unreachable. Katherine had called multiple times, but the number was disconnected. Emails went unanswered. She even tried mailing a letter to the cafe, but it was returned. If someone was telling her to start with the cafe, maybe Yareli had finally resurfaced, or maybe the cafe had new ownership. Either way, it was a direction, something she hadn't had in years. Katherine leaned back, exhaled shakily, and whispered, "Then that's where I'll start again." 7 years of waiting, 7 years of hoping, and now a note. By morning, her suitcase was packed. Her passport, recently renewed, was zipped into the side compartment. She had booked a one-way ticket to Curacao, departing that same night. As she double-checked her reservations, she sent an email to her old friend, Tomas, a retired customs officer who had helped her during the original investigation. They'd stayed in touch occasionally, though the messages had grown sparse over the years. "I'm coming back. Something's changed. Meet me?" She stared at the screen for a second before hitting send. The knot in her chest hadn't loosened, but it had shifted. It wasn't just grief anymore. It was momentum, a reason to move, a reason to believe that maybe, just maybe, Ethan and Lucy hadn't disappeared into thin air after all. "I need to speak with someone who knows what happened," Katherine said into the phone, her voice low but firm as she sat at the edge of her dining room table, the one she hadn't used for anything other than sorting through files in years. She had just arrived home from the passport office when the call she had placed to the Café Del Mar went straight to voicemail. Again. For a second, her fingers hovered over the call log on her phone, and as always, her screen was littered with missed attempts and unanswered texts. Names without responses. Numbers disconnected. She tossed the phone onto the table, frustrated. The walls were lined with corkboards and sticky notes, marked with pins and fading ink, some almost illegible after years of sun exposure from the nearby window. On the chair across from her sat a tower of manila folders labeled by year: 2016 Cruise Manifest, 2017 Customs, Records, 2019 Anonymous Tips. She'd memorized every line in those documents, and yet each morning she returned to them as if some overlooked clue might finally scream for her attention. What weighed heavier than any of it, though, was the creeping awareness that no one was looking anymore. No one except her. She opened her inbox, instinctively refreshing her email even though she rarely received anything beyond spam or notifications from forums she'd long abandoned. But this time, she paused. The subject line stood out in plain black text. Saw her, Amsterdam. Her breath caught. The sender's name was unfamiliar, just a string of numbers. She opened the email, her heart pounding not from excitement, but from a deeply rooted suspicion that it would be another cruel false alarm. The message read, I believe I saw your daughter, Claire Wilson, near Jordan, Amsterdam. Blonde, same age. She looked scared. I wasn't sure until I recognized her from an old post online. I thought you should know. That was it. No attachments, no signature, no number. She sat back, stunned. Lucy's real name was Claire. Almost no one remembered that. Only close friends, relatives, or someone who had paid deep attention to the case early on. She read the message again, more slowly this time, dissecting every word. Could this be real? Her first instinct was to call someone, but who? The detectives had given up. Her closest friends stopped answering after year 2. Even her sister had stopped. Returning calls last winter. Her hands moved without thinking, pulling out the drawer beneath the table and retrieving the thick envelope labeled Europe. It was filled with contacts she had collected years ago. International journalists, law enforcement liaisons, embassy numbers, translators, and a few informants she'd been warned not to trust. But trust had become an abstract concept anyway. She found a business card with a Dutch prefix scribbled in blue ink and dialed. No answer. She tried another. Voicemail. She stared at the computer screen again, her cursor hovering over the reply. Button. She typed, Please. Who are you? Are you sure? Can you tell me more? Any photo? Please respond. She clicked send, her fingers trembling. Then she sat back, allowing her mind to imagine what Claire, Lucy, would look like now. 7 years older. Her daughter would be 16, maybe taller, maybe with different hair. But those eyes, deep brown like her father's, would still be unmistakable. The kind of eyes you don't forget. Katherine covered her face, not knowing whether she wanted the sender to respond or disappear like all the others before. False hope was a predator she had fed. Too many times. Later that night, she sat in the dark with only her desk lamp on, flipping through old letters. Some had never been opened, mostly rejections from TV networks or cold responses from legal departments refusing to help without credible evidence. One letter from a private investigator in Miami, who she had hired in 2018, said he believed they had crossed into Venezuela via an undocumented boat. He disappeared 2 months later, literally vanished. She had always wondered if he'd gotten too close to something, or if it was all coincidence. She sifted through another pile, handwritten messages from strangers who'd followed her online campaign. At first, they had sent messages of hope, prayers, candlelight vigils, but slowly they dwindled. Then the media turned. Delusional mother can't let go, read one headline. Cruise tragedy or clever cover-up, asked another. She didn't care anymore what people thought. She hadn't cared in years, but each rejection had left a dent. Every unanswered letter, another crack in her already splintered resolve. And yet, here she was, still standing, still chasing shadows, still picking up the phone every time it rang, even if she knew the line would be silent. Just after midnight, the screen lit up again, an email reply. This time, it contained a photo, blurry, zoomed in, and partially obscured, but unmistakably a teenage girl with light hair walking near a tram stop in Amsterdam. Her head was down, and she appeared to be clutching a backpack, but the shape of her face, the curve of her jaw, Katherine felt her whole body freeze. Could it really be her? She enlarged the photo, her eyes darting between this image and the last known photo of Claire from the cruise terminal. Side by side, it wasn't definitive. It never was. But her gut screamed louder than it had in years. She needed to go. Not tomorrow, not next week, now. She opened a new tab and searched for flights. She didn't care how much it cost. She would pawn her car if she had to. She clicked through departure times, booked the earliest available option with trembling hands, and forwarded the itinerary to her own email for backup. Then she stared at the screen. Amsterdam. She had never even been to the Netherlands. But maybe, just maybe, her daughter had. At the airport the next morning, Katherine sat silently near her gate. She clutched her phone tightly, afraid she'd miss another email. She hadn't told anyone where she was going. There was no one left to tell. She passed through security with a numbness that felt both familiar and foreign. Her bag was light, just essentials, her laptop, hard drives, an external battery, folders with copies of Claire's medical records, birth certificate, DNA report, and the photo she had just received. She hadn't slept. Her eyes were red but sharp. She was no longer a grieving mother. She was a woman on a mission. A woman clawing through every layer of apathy the world had placed around her. When the gate agent called her row, she stood quickly, blending into the line of passengers like any other traveler. But inside, Katherine carried a world that had collapsed and kept spinning on sheer will. As the plane ascended hours later, her fingers were still gripping that image, her lifeline, her curse, and maybe finally, her answer. When she landed in Amsterdam, the air felt foreign, not in scent or temperature, but in weight. Every face she passed might hold a clue. Every corner might lead to Claire. She moved quickly through customs, flagged a cab, and handed the driver the tram stop location marked in the email. He didn't ask questions. Katherine stared out the window, memorizing everything: billboards, intersections, graffiti, faces. Her thoughts were loud but focused. She had one mission. The driver dropped her off near the corner of a cafe with a red awning. It wasn't the same cafe from Curaçao. This one was smaller, with metal tables outside and bicycles chained along the curb. She sat at one of the tables and waited for the sender of the email to appear, or perhaps for the girl herself to walk by again. Hours passed. She ordered coffee she didn't drink. Then, just as she was preparing to leave, a young man with wireframe glasses approached her table. "You're the mother, right? The one from the news?" he asked, holding his phone tightly in both hands. Katherine's eyes locked on his. "Yes. Do you know where she is?" "She asked." He nodded slowly. "I think so." "Are you Katherine Wilson?" the woman asked with a slight accent as she approached the table, her eyes darting around nervously. Katherine stood up slowly, measuring the stranger with guarded curiosity. "Yes," she replied cautiously. The young man who had first spoken to her stepped back, as if his part in the story was already finished. The woman extended her hand. "I'm Sophia Riley. I was the one who sent the email. We need to talk." Katherine didn't sit immediately. Her body was tense, her instincts conflicted between hope and skepticism. "You said you saw her," she began, not wasting time. "You said it was Claire," Sophia nodded. "I know how it sounds, but I wouldn't have reached out if I wasn't sure." Katherine gestured to the seat across from her. "Tell me everything, and don't leave anything out." Sophia exhaled and sat, placing her phone on the table like it was a piece of evidence. "A few nights ago, I was at this bar near the university. My friends dragged me out. I was about to leave when I saw her, or someone who looks just like her. Same face, same hair. She looked lost, scared, and then she disappeared." Katherine narrowed her eyes. "Disappeared? How?" Sophia didn't flinch. She was talking to a man at the bar, much older. Something felt off. I only noticed her because she looked directly at me. It wasn't recognition, more like desperation, like she was silently asking for help. But before I could do anything, she was gone. Katherine leaned forward. "Did you follow them? Did you see where they went?" Sophia shook her head with visible regret. "No," I hesitated. "It happened fast. I didn't think much until I got home and couldn't stop thinking about her. That's when I remembered your story. I saw a video once, years ago. I Googled her name. That's when I found the campaign site. The photos matched. It has to be her." Katherine's fingers clenched under the table. She had heard hopeful words before, followed leads into dead ends. But this felt different. There was a tremble in Sophia's voice that wasn't rehearsed. "What bar was it?" Katherine asked. "Do you remember the address?" Sophia nodded. "It's called De Zwaan, near Westerstraat. I can take you there." As they walked through the crowded streets, Katherine's pulse raced. She didn't speak, afraid her voice would betray the fragile balance of desperation and restraint she was trying to maintain. Sophia led the way, weaving past cyclists and trams, finally stopping in front of an old building with a narrow wooden door and a flickering neon sign. "This is it," she said. Katherine hesitated before stepping inside. The bar was dimly lit and smelled of alcohol and perfume. A few patrons lingered, but it wasn't crowded. Katherine scanned every face, but none resembled her daughter. Sophia approached the bartender, exchanged a few words in Dutch, then turned back. "He remembers her. Says she was here earlier this week, maybe Monday. Came in with a man. Didn't say much. Paid. Cash." Katherine stepped up to the bar. "Do you have cameras?" she asked. The bartender shrugged. "They don't work," he replied flatly. "Haven't in months." Frustration boiled in Katherine's chest. Every lead was like holding smoke, visible for a moment, then gone. Still, she pressed on. "What else?" "Did he say?" Sophia translated again. "He said the man seemed controlling, always had a hand on her back, and she never looked anyone in the eye." After leaving the bar, they walked in silence for several blocks before Katherine stopped abruptly on the edge of a canal. "I don't know what to do," she muttered, staring at the water. Sophia stood beside her. "I get it. You don't want to believe this and get crushed again. But what if this is it?" Katherine looked at her. "You have no idea how many times I've heard that. What if this is it? And then I follow, and it's not. And each time it takes something from me I can't get back." Sophia nodded solemnly. "Then why did you come?" Katherine didn't answer right away. When she finally did, her voice was quiet but resolute. "Because what if this really is the time I say no?" And it was her. She pulled out her phone and opened her notes app, scrolling through names. "I have someone I can contact. A man named Thomas. He used to work customs. He knows how to ask questions without raising alarms." She paused, then glanced at Sophia. "But I need to know, are you in this? Really in it?" Sophia straightened. "I wouldn't have contacted you if I wasn't." Later that evening, back at the small Airbnb she had booked, Katherine sat on the edge of the bed with her shoes still on. The room was bare, impersonal, just a mattress, a kitchenette, and a tiny window that faced a brick wall. She turned on her phone and drafted a message to Thomas. "Urgent. I'm in Amsterdam. Need help locating someone. Possibly Claire. Can we talk?" She stared at the screen, hesitating, then hit send. Her mind was still spinning with the image of the girl at the bar, that maybe girl. It wasn't enough. She needed proof. She needed someone else to see what she saw to confirm it. Her eyes fell on the photo Sophia had sent earlier. She enlarged it again, zooming in until it was just pixels. But her mother's instinct kept whispering that it could be her. Maybe older, maybe thinner, maybe with a different posture. But something about that face. Katherine shut her eyes tight. She couldn't afford another spiral. She had one mission. If Sophia was right, then Claire was still alive. And if she was alive, Katherine would find her, even if it meant burning the rest of her life to do it. Thomas responded an hour later. "I can meet, but we need to be careful. You might be looking at something bigger than a lost child." Katherine stared at the message, reading it again. That phrasing, something bigger. It wasn't the first time she had heard someone imply there were layers to Claire's disappearance. Smuggling, theories, trafficking, blackmail. She had chased every one of them. Most led nowhere. But this wasn't a theory anymore. This was a possible sighting. And Tomas was someone who didn't scare easily. She responded quickly. Where and when? As she waited, she glanced at the wall, where she had taped a single photo of her daughter earlier that day. It was the one taken just minutes before the cruise departed. Claire had her arms wrapped around her father's waist, smiling at the camera. Katherine stared at it now, remembering how carefree they had looked. 7 years ago, she had taken that photo, thinking it would be part of a vacation album. Now it was all she had left, the starting point of a mystery that had swallowed her life whole. Thomas replied with coordinates and a time. Tomorrow morning, discreet place. Katherine took a deep breath and began organizing her folders. She packed only what was essential: the updated timeline, the bar's location, Sophia's statement, and every single image and report that could support her claim. Her hands moved quickly, fueled by adrenaline and obsession. When she zipped the bag shut, she allowed herself a moment of stillness, her eyes fixed on the floor. No tears, no prayers, just resolve. She wasn't here to beg anymore. She wasn't here to plead with strangers for sympathy. She was here to fight. And tomorrow, she would begin that fight with Tomas, not with hope, but with information, action, and the kind of pain that made people brave enough to do the impossible. She's there, Katherine said, her voice cracking as she grabbed Sophia's arm and pointed across the narrow canal. Behind a glass window bathed in pink and red lighting, a girl stood awkwardly in a lingerie set, swaying slightly, her posture unstable. Katherine didn't blink. Her breath caught in her throat. "That's her! That's Claire!" she whispered, then louder. "That's my daughter!" Sophia turned, stunned, and stared. The girl's hair was pulled back, her makeup heavy, but even through the distortion of the glass, the resemblance was undeniable. Katherine rushed across the street, weaving between late-night tourists and barely noticing the gawking onlookers who assumed this was part of the neighborhood's theatrics. She reached the window and slammed her hands against it, her voice rising in a panic. "Claire! Claire, it's me! Baby, look at me!" The girl, labeled Tracy on a placard, behind her, turned slowly, her pupils dilated, her expression blank. Her body barely responded. She took a step forward, then stopped. Katherine shouted louder, her fists pounding the glass. "Claire, it's Mom! Please, say something!" Inside the room, a man with a clipboard barked something in Dutch and disappeared behind a side curtain. Seconds later, a heavy-set bouncer appeared at the door and shoved it open with authority. "You need to leave," the bouncer said in broken English, stepping between Katherine and the door. "This is private business." Katherine pushed against him. Desperation, overriding logic. "That's my daughter. She's drugged. She doesn't belong here. Let me see her." The man's grip tightened around her arm, and within moments 2 more security guards approached. "Mom, you need to go," one of them repeated. Sophia tried to intercede, speaking rapidly in Dutch, but they ignored her. Katherine screamed louder, trying to reach Claire's consciousness. "You know me! I'm your mother! Please, fight through it, please!" The girl inside blinked slowly, her head lolling to the side, as though trying to process what was happening. Just as Katherine lunged again, a patrolling officer across the street noticed the disturbance and ran over. "Back off!" he ordered the guards. "What's going on here?" Katherine pointed frantically at the glass. "She's my daughter. She's been missing for 7 years. She's in there and she's not okay." The officer called for backup and entered the establishment. The guards hesitated, but stood down as other officers began arriving. Within minutes, the entrance was sealed. Katherine stood trembling, tears pouring down her face as she watched the police disappear into the building. Sophia stood beside her, both hands covering her mouth. Neither of them spoke as the minutes passed. Inside, shadows moved behind the glass as officers confronted staff. Then, the curtain behind the girl's room opened again. A man in a grey suit with a shaved head was escorted out in handcuffs. Katherine stared at him, unable to recognize the face. "Who is he?" she asked. "Do you know him?" Sophia shook her head. "No, but maybe he knows her." Katherine took a shaky breath. Moments later, 2 female officers gently led the girl out of the side door. She could barely walk. Her body leaned into the arms of the officer on her right. Her eyes remained unfocused, but her lips moved as if she were mumbling something. Katherine tried to approach, but was held back. "Please, let me talk to her," she cried. One officer raised a hand. "She's under medical supervision. She'll be taken to the hospital for evaluation." Katherine's knees buckled. Sophia grabbed her before she collapsed. "They're taking care of her now," she said. "She's safe." Katherine clutched Sophia's arm like a lifeline. "But she didn't recognize me. She looked right at me and didn't see me." At the hospital, Katherine waited in a small visitor's lounge while officers spoke to doctors behind closed doors. She had given her statement already, answered the questions for the 10th time: name, date of birth, last known sighting, passport number. All the answers she had rehearsed for 7 years. Now she sat still, her hands numb, eyes fixed on the hallway ahead. Sophia had gone to fetch coffee, but Katherine barely noticed when she returned. "The man they arrested is named Victor Clausen," Sophia explained quietly, sitting beside her. "Police say he's suspected of trafficking girls through Germany, Belgium, and the Netherlands. If this is her, if it's really Claire, they may have found more than one victim." Katherine exhaled deeply, the weight of those words pressing into her spine. "They said her name is Tracy." She didn't deny it. Sophia shook her head. That could be the name they gave her. She's been through hell. She might not even remember what's real anymore. Katherine ran a hand down her face. But what if she does? What if she remembers and just doesn't want to come back? Her voice broke again. What if she blames me for not finding her sooner? Hours passed before a doctor emerged, clipboard in hand. "Mrs. Wilson?" he asked. Gently. Katherine stood instantly. "Yes. Is she... Can I see her?" The doctor hesitated. "She's stable, dehydrated, heavily sedated, but we've begun detoxification. She hasn't said much, just fragments. She's scared. We need time before she sees anyone. For now, we're treating her as an unidentified minor until her identity is confirmed." Katherine's heart fell. "But I am her mother." The doctor nodded. "We'll collect a DNA sample to compare with the database. Until then, please understand, this is protocol." Katherine clenched her jaw. She had fought so hard to get to this moment, and now bureaucracy stood between her and the truth. "How long will it take?" she asked. "Expedited, maybe 24 to 36 hours, he said. Katherine sat back down, her body exhausted but her mind racing. Claire was just down the hall, possibly, and yet she couldn't hold her, couldn't hear her. A voice, the uncertainty was unbearable. She looked at Sophia. "What if it isn't her?" Sophia met her gaze. "Then we start again. But I believe it is, I know it is." Katherine barely slept that night. She stayed at the hospital, refusing to leave. Sophia tried convincing her to get some rest, but Katherine remained in the hallway, sitting in an uncomfortable chair, watching every nurse who walked past. She thought about the day Claire was born, how her cry had filled the delivery room and made Ethan cry for the first time in years. She thought about Claire's favorite bedtime stories, the stuffed giraffe she refused to sleep without, and how she had insisted on wearing mismatched socks to school because it made her faster. Every memory weighed like a stone in her chest. Then she thought about the girl in the glass window, empty-eyed, hollow, poisoned by whatever life had forced her to become. Was that Claire? Could that kind of transformation happen without the soul recognizing its own blood? When the doctor returned in the morning, Katherine rose before he said anything. He held a folder in his hands. "Mrs. Wilson," he said slowly, "the DNA test came back. She's your daughter." The room spun. Katherine didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply whispered, "Then bring her back to me." But bringing her back wouldn't be easy. The psychiatrist assigned to Claire's care informed Katherine that her daughter was exhibiting signs of severe dissociation and trauma-induced amnesia. She doesn't respond to her real name yet. She flinches when touched. She's scared of loud voices and doesn't trust anyone. Katherine swallowed hard. "What do I do?" she asked. The psychiatrist looked at her with gentle firmness. "You wait. You show up. You let her see that love doesn't vanish, not even after 7 years." Katherine nodded. "Can I sit with her?" The psychiatrist paused. "She's resting now, but I'll let her know you're here. When she's ready, she'll see you." That answer was enough. Katherine returned to her hallway seat and watched the door. Her war wasn't over. But for the first time in years, her daughter was no longer a ghost. She was real, she was alive, and she was within reach. "I'm your mother, Claire." Katherine's voice trembled as she spoke, her eyes locked on the young woman sitting across from her. The name tag on the hospital bed read, Erin Jansen. The girl's hands were folded on her lap, eyes cast downward, chewing on her lower lip in a nervous rhythm that reminded Katherine of the way Claire used to fidget before school recitals. But the girl didn't react, not the way Katherine hoped. No embrace, no tears, no gasp of recognition, just silence. The nurse had left them alone after carefully wheeling in a tray of soup and medication, placing it between them like a physical barrier. "They told me you've been going by a different name," Katherine continued, "but I know who you are, and the test confirmed it. You're Claire, my daughter." Claire finally looked up, her eyes glassy. "I don't remember that name," she said softly. Her voice was light but tired. It wasn't a denial. It was worse. It was honest. Erin wasn't a disguise she was trying to maintain. It was all she believed she was. Katherine gripped the sides of the plastic chair tightly. "That's okay," she whispered, "then I'll remind you." The silence that followed wasn't angry or hostile. It was heavy with distance, the kind that takes years to build and more than love to dismantle. Claire glanced toward the window but didn't speak again. Katherine sat still, careful not to lean in too close. Every instinct in her body told her to reach out, to grab her daughter's hand, to pull her into the kind of hug only a mother can give. But this wasn't the child who used to fall asleep in her arms. This was a teenage girl who had survived horrors, whose eyes didn't blink the same way, who had learned to shield herself from everything, even kindness. "They told me I was from Belgium," Claire said suddenly, "that my parents died in a car crash, that I was lucky to survive." Katherine's breath caught. Lies. Years of lies layered over her daughter's mind like paint over a masterpiece. "Who told you that?" she asked. Claire shrugged. "Different people. Men. Women. I didn't stay anywhere. Long." Her voice cracked slightly, the first sign of something raw pushing through. Some were worse than others. Katherine swallowed her pain, refusing to let tears take over. "You weren't lucky, Claire. You were stolen. But you're not alone anymore." A nurse knocked lightly before entering to check vitals, breaking the fragile rhythm of their exchange. Claire didn't look at her, used to people hovering without permission. Katherine stepped aside, waiting near the doorway. As the nurse left, she whispered to Katherine, "Try not to pressure her. She's still detoxing. The memories will come. You're not, but they need to be hers." Katherine nodded, then returned to her seat. Claire picked at the soup but didn't eat it. "Did I have a dog?" she asked suddenly. Katherine blinked in surprise. "Yes. His name was Rufus. You picked him from the shelter when you were 5. You used to sleep with his paw in your hand." Claire looked up again. Her eyes didn't light up, not yet, but something shifted. "That sounds right," she said. Katherine took the smallest breath of relief. "Do you want to see pictures?" she offered. Claire hesitated, then gave a faint nod. Katherine opened her bag slowly and pulled out a small photo album, worn at the corners. She laid it gently on the bed between them. Claire didn't touch it yet, but she didn't push it away either. Katherine opened the album, flipping to a photo of Claire at age 6, her cheeks red from laughing, hugging Rufus tightly in front of their old porch. "That's our house in Miami," she said softly. You used to race Rufus up the stairs every morning before school. You always won. He let you." Claire leaned forward slightly, her eyes scanning the photo. She didn't say anything, but her fingers twitched, almost reaching for the page. Katherine turned another, Claire with Ethan at the beach, both of them mid-splash, frozen in joy. "He was your dad," Katherine added. "You two were inseparable. He taught you to ride a bike and make pancakes." Claire's lips parted. "I see him sometimes," she whispered. Katherine's heart stopped. "What do you mean?" Claire shook her head slowly. "In dreams, or when I'm alone. I didn't know who he was, but he always looked kind." Katherine closed her eyes for a second, overwhelmed. "He was kind, and he loved you more than anything." Claire looked back down at the photo. "I think I remember." His voice, the way she said it, cautiously as if the memory might vanish if said too loud, told Katherine they were finally peeling back a layer. The next few hours passed in a rhythm neither of them expected, not filled with warmth, but not cold either. Claire asked questions, simple ones. What grade she had been in, her favorite color as a child, what holidays were like. Katherine answered each patiently, drawing stories from every corner of her memory. When Claire asked about her own name, Katherine explained why they'd named her Claire after her grandmother, and how she used to insist. People spell it with an E at the end, so it looked fancier. Claire chuckled faintly. "That sounds like something I'd do." It wasn't a breakthrough, but it was more than Katherine could have hoped for that morning. "Why did they change my name?" Claire asked. "Why Erin?" Katherine had no answer. "To make you forget," she said, "to erase where you came from, but they didn't succeed." Claire turned to her slowly. "Not completely," she said. Her voice was steadier now, more present. Katherine smiled faintly but didn't cry. She knew better than to make this moment about her. She simply sat, holding space, letting her daughter exist without pressure, trusting that truth didn't need to be forced, only welcomed. Eventually, the psychiatrist returned and suggested a break. "Short sessions," he advised. "She needs space between the waves." Katherine nodded and promised to come back in the afternoon. As she stood to leave, she looked at Claire. "Do you want me to come back later?" she asked gently. Claire nodded once. Yes, just that. But it was enough to carry Katherine out of the room on steadier feet. Outside, she found Sophia waiting. The younger woman stood from the bench and met her with an uncertain smile. "How did it go?" she asked. Katherine exhaled deeply. "She doesn't remember me, but she's listening. That's something." Sophia nodded. "That's everything." Katherine sat beside her and finally let herself cry. Not the uncontrolled sobs of grief, but quiet, measured tears. The kind that come when hope begins to feel like a real possibility again, even after being buried under 7 years of pain and silence. Later that evening, when Katherine returned, Claire was awake, staring at the album she'd left behind. "I looked at the whole thing," Claire said, without prompting. Some of it felt familiar, some didn't. Katherine sat without speaking. Claire turned to the last page, a photo of the three of them, taken the morning of the cruise, with the ocean behind them. Claire touched her own face in the photo. "This one feels the farthest away," she said, "but I want to get back to her, to the girl I was." Katherine reached out then, slowly, and Claire didn't pull away. Her fingers rested lightly over her daughter's hand. "We'll find her together," she said, "no matter how long it takes." For the first time since arriving in Amsterdam, Katherine felt the possibility of a new beginning, not only for Claire, but for herself. The girl in the bed was not the daughter she lost. She was the daughter still fighting to come back, and Katherine would wait, fight, and love through every step of that return. "I remember the coffee cup," Claire began. Her voice so low, Katherine had to lean in to hear her. "It was blue, with chipped edges. We were laughing. Dad was telling me that stupid joke about the giraffe and the bar. I didn't even get it, but I laughed anyway." She paused, her gaze fixed on her own, fixed on fingers, which now trembled slightly on the hospital blanket. "You got up. You said you'd be right back. You walked toward the little store on the corner. I watched you leave, and then..." Her voice trailed off. Katherine didn't breathe. She waited. Claire's lips parted again, and her tone shifted. Then a man came from behind me. I thought he was another tourist. He was smiling. I was too slow to react when he grabbed my arm. Dad stood up, told him to back off. But there was another man already behind him. Katherine flinched. What happened? She asked, barely able to get the words out. Claire closed her eyes. They hit him fast, hard. He fell sideways and didn't get back up. He tried to stand, but couldn't. They dragged me. I screamed. I fought. He was still crawling after me when we left the dock. Katherine pressed a hand to her mouth, but no sound came out. Her eyes flooded, but the tears refused to fall yet, as if her body was still frozen in the horror. Claire kept speaking, not meeting her eyes. They told me if I screamed again, they'd kill him. I asked if he was alive. One of them said, "Not for long." Her voice cracked, but she kept going. I think I passed out. I don't remember the boat clearly. Just the sting on my neck. I think it was a needle. When I woke up, we weren't on the island anymore. Katherine sat still, trying to absorb the weight of every word. Her mind replayed the final security footage she had seen years ago. Herself boarding the ship, calling for help, unaware that her husband was dying just yards away. Why didn't anyone see anything? She whispered, to herself more than to Claire. Why didn't they do something? Claire finally looked at her. They did. They looked, but they didn't see. That's the difference. I screamed with my eyes, but nobody knew what that meant. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The words lingered in the sterile air like invisible bruises. Then Claire continued, I don't remember the first few places. My mind, it's blurry. They gave us pills. Food tasted like cotton. They moved us constantly. Sometimes we were in cities, sometimes in houses with boarded windows. There were others, other girls. We didn't talk much. Talking made you weaker. And if you got weak, they got rid of you. Katherine's hands were trembling. What do you mean, got rid of? She asked. Claire's eyes became distant. Sometimes a girl would start crying a lot, or stop eating. Then one night she'd just be gone. The next morning, someone new was there, and we weren't allowed to ask questions. She paused, then added, I learned to do what they said. Smile. Obey. They had names for us. Numbers too. I was Tracy. And for a while, then I was Lola in Prague. Sometimes I wasn't anyone at all. Katherine felt a wave of nausea. She had imagined horrible things before, but hearing it in Claire's voice made every theory feel tame in comparison. I think it was Berlin, Claire said slowly, when I finally gave up. Remembering, Katherine raised her head. What do you mean? Claire shifted in bed, pulling her knees closer. There was this man, Victor. He was like the others, but different too. More careful. He didn't hit us, but he controlled us in other ways. He kept records. Told us we were debts being paid, that no one was looking for us anymore. And after a while, I believed him. Katherine winced. But I was looking. I never stopped. Claire offered a ghost of a smile. I know that now. But back then, every year that passed made it harder to believe. I forgot what day it was. What year. They changed. My hair, my name, my voice. Her fingers reached up, brushing the ends of her hair. This color isn't real. It's what he liked. I dyed it every week. Katherine leaned forward. You don't have to do that anymore. Not for anyone. You're not his. You're not theirs. Claire looked back at her mother, her voice flat. But I'm not yours either, not yet. Katherine felt something fracture inside her, not because Claire's words were cruel. They weren't. They were honest, raw. And in their honesty was the unbearable reality that healing wouldn't come with a single hug or DNA result. I never believed. It would be simple, Katherine said, but I wasn't prepared for this. Claire tilted her head. For what? Katherine breathed in deeply. For hearing that he died in front of you, that I wasn't there, that I left him, left you, alone. I've imagined 100 ways that day could have gone, but this... Her voice cracked and finally gave in. I should have fought harder. I should have believed the worst when they said it was just a disappearance. I told myself lies so I wouldn't lose my mind. Claire's eyes didn't soften, but they didn't harden either. You did what you could, she said. Just like I did what I had to. We survived in different ways. Katherine reached out, her fingers brushing Claire's knuckles. This time, Claire didn't pull away. Then maybe, Katherine whispered, we can learn to live again, together, in whatever time we have left. Claire looked down at their hands. I don't know if I can be who I was, she said quietly. That girl died a long time ago. Katherine nodded slowly. Maybe she did, or maybe she's just hiding, like you were. And maybe she's waiting to see if this world is safe enough to come back to. Claire was silent. Then after a long pause, she said, I still dream of water, of that port, of the smell of coffee, of Dad shouting. Sometimes I wake up gasping, but I can't remember if it's real or imagined. Katherine leaned back. It's real. I remember it too. I can tell you every second of that day, and I'll keep telling you until your memory catches up. Claire tilted her head again. Would you really do that, even if I never fully come back? Katherine didn't blink. Yes, because even if pieces of you are gone, what's left is still my daughter. I didn't come all this way for a memory. I came for you. A silence hung between them, but it was different now, not empty, not tense, just full of things neither of them knew how to say yet. The nurse entered again, letting them know visiting hours were over. Claire nodded, understanding the routine. As Katherine stood to leave, she hesitated at the door. Can I come back tomorrow? She asked. Claire gave a small nod. Yes, it was more than permission. It was an invitation. Katherine stepped out into the corridor, her heart heavy but full. Sophia waited outside, rising as she approached. How is she? She asked. Katherine stared ahead, her eyes tired. She told me what happened. All of it, and I'm not okay. Sophia gently touched her arm. No one would be. Katherine looked at her. He died trying to protect her, and I never knew. I never knew. Her voice cracked again. Sophia said nothing. There were no words. Katherine continued walking. Her steps weren't steady, but they moved. Forward, one after another. She couldn't rewrite the past. She couldn't undo the trauma, but she could show up. She could bear witness. And maybe, just maybe, she could help her daughter learn how to exist again in a world that had tried to erase her. That was the name, Claire said slowly, her voice brittle. Lutasov. They never said it around the others, just whispered it when he wasn't in the room. Katherine stiffened, the pen in her hand freezing mid-sentence as she took down her daughter's words. Across the table, two detectives looked at each other sharply. One of them, Inspector Dan Meyer, stood up without saying anything and walked out of the interview room, pulling out his phone. Katherine leaned forward. Are you sure that's the name? Claire nodded. He wasn't like the others. They answered to him, even Victor. Detective Van Loon, who had remained seated, opened his laptop and began typing rapidly. Where did you hear the name? He asked. Claire hesitated. Once in Belgium, he came to check on us. They said to behave because Lutasov is watching. Another time, a woman got too sick, and he told someone to remove a problem. That's what he called her. A problem. Katherine's hands began to shake. What did he look like? Van Loon asked. Claire narrowed her eyes as if trying to pull a ghost from her memory. Tall, broad shoulders, American accent. He had military posture, clean, controlled. His eyes, they were always empty. Inspector Meyer returned moments later, placing a printed photo on the table. Is this him? Claire leaned forward. Her face paled. Yes. The image was older, grainy, taken from a passport database, but the face was unmistakable. Meyer didn't wait. That man, he said, turning to Katherine, is not just anyone. His name is Lutasov, former U.S. military intelligence, discharged in 2009 under classified circumstances. We've had whispers of his involvement in arms trafficking and organized exploitation networks across Eastern Europe, but we never had confirmation. Until now. Katherine stared at the photo. He was on the ship, she said slowly. He was working the cruise line. He was there. Meyer looked at her. Are you saying he was on board the day Claire disappeared? Katherine nodded. I remember his face. I thought he was just security, one of the many. Men in dark uniforms near the gangway, but that was him. He had a badge. He watched everything. Van Loon stood up. We need to verify this with the cruise's old personnel records. If he was assigned to the ship, this changes everything. That means her abduction wasn't a random act. It was orchestrated, internally. Within hours, the Dutch police had requested access to archived security logs from the cruise line. Katherine sat in stunned silence as agents loaded external hard drives into their systems. The hallway buzzed with urgency. When the records came back, Maya called her. Into the viewing room. "Watch this," he said, hitting play. The grainy footage showed the boarding process 7 years prior. Katherine watched herself entering, holding Claire's hand, followed by Ethan, and then there he was. Luta Sov, standing near the dock, wearing a dark security jacket with the cruise logo, earpiece in place, clipboard in hand. His eyes scanned passengers calmly. "He was working it," Katherine murmured. Maya nodded grimly. Not only that, he had full access to logistics, docking schedules, cabin assignments, passenger information. Another agent walked in with a folder. "They found something," she said. Sov's name was erased from the employee roster the day after Claire's disappearance. Retroactively, Van Loon opened the file. "He erased himself," he muttered. "Which means someone helped him." Katherine's breath hitched. "You're telling me this man used his position on the cruise line to help orchestrate my daughter's kidnapping and then disappeared?" Maya's jaw tightened. No, he didn't disappear. He vanished strategically. That night, Katherine sat across from Thomas in a quiet corner of the precinct. He had arrived from Rotterdam after hearing about the breakthrough. "I ran his name through my old intelligence contacts," he said, placing his phone on the table. "Luta Sov isn't just a trafficker. He's a ghost. He has at least 5 aliases tied to operations in Moldova, Ukraine, and Morocco. In each case, the pattern is the same, embedded in logistics, working from within. He doesn't take children from the streets. He infiltrates systems, institutions, cruises, adoption agencies, refugee camps, places no one suspects." Katherine closed her eyes, her body rigid. "So it was never random," she whispered. "It was never just bad luck. We were targeted." Thomas leaned forward. "Claire wasn't the only one. We're pulling records from the same cruise. 3 other children were reported missing that year, all brushed off as custody disputes or runaways." Katherine stood. "And no one saw the connection?" Thomas nodded. "Because the system didn't want to. Sov knew where the blind spots were. He created them." Katherine looked down at her hands, her voice hollow. "I thought I'd lost her to a moment. I didn't know it was a machine." The next morning, Dutch authorities launched a formal task force. Interpol had already flagged Sov's name before, but Claire's testimony gave them something they never had: eyewitness identification and a link to his access inside a civilian transport system. Katherine sat beside Claire, who had been moved to a more secure wing of the hospital. When she shared what they'd learned, Claire didn't cry. She just stared at the wall. "I told you he was more than just another man," she said softly. "Even the guards were afraid of him. They wouldn't speak unless he spoke first." Katherine gripped her daughter's hand. "You remembered his name," she said. "That's going to help stop him." Claire gave a small shake of the head. "It won't stop him. He's already building something else. That's what he does. When one ring collapses, he disappears and starts another. You think it ends here? It doesn't." Katherine didn't argue. She understood. Sov wasn't just a criminal. He was an architect of cruelty. But now he had a name, a face, and that was more than anyone had ever managed before. "Then we make this count," she said. "We burn his name into every report, every agency, every database. We drag him into the light." That afternoon, Maya called her into the office again. "You need to see this," he said. He pressed play on a restored audio log from the cruise's internal communication system, a backup only recently decrypted. A man's voice crackled through. "Section Bravo clear. Target visual confirmed. Parental unit separation in progress. Stand by for pickup. Katherine gripped the edge of the desk. That was about us, she said. Maya nodded. There's more. Another voice responded. Extraction window is 10 minutes. Execute. No trace. Katherine turned away from the speaker, her stomach churning. They planned it like a military op, she said, because it was one. Maya looked at her, something unreadable in his gaze. Sov didn't just exploit the system, he trained it, and now we have proof. Katherine felt the floor shift beneath her. Everything she thought she knew, every theory, every possible scenario, had been too small. Sov hadn't just taken Claire, he had built the conditions for it to happen. And everyone who looked the other way, from cruise officials to government bodies, had played a part. There was no more room for mercy. Not now. By evening, an arrest warrant had been issued internationally. Claire's identity was sealed for her safety, and security was doubled at the hospital. Katherine watched her daughter sleep from the hallway window, her face finally at peace, even if just for a moment. She pulled out her phone and typed a message to a journalist she had once trusted, one who believed her before anyone else did. I have a name, Luta Sov. He was inside the cruise. I need this story everywhere. She hit send and turned away. There was still grief, still rage, still healing to fight for, but now there was also something else. Leverage. Sov had operated in silence for years, but Claire's memory had shattered that shield, and Katherine, the woman once ignored and dismissed, now held the one truth that could unravel an entire empire. The name no one wanted to say was now the only name that mattered. Are you ready? Katherine asked, holding the folded poster in her hands as Claire stood next to her, staring at the street pole where it had hung for years. Claire nodded slowly, her fingers brushing the edges of the tape that once secured her missing person flyer. Let me do it, she said, and gently peeled it away. The paper was worn, corners curled, the image faded, but it had been her, the girl everyone had been looking for, the girl no one had truly seen. Katherine didn't speak. She just watched her daughter roll the poster tightly and slide it into her bag, not to keep as a reminder of trauma, but as proof of victory. Claire turned, eyes steady. There's a new sign going up next week, she said. I helped design it. Katherine managed a small smile. I know. I saw the mock-up. The city had approved a set of awareness banners across Coral Gables, warnings about trafficking, helpline numbers, and survivor resources. Claire's suggestion to place them in the same spots where missing children flyers used to hang had been accepted without hesitation. This wasn't about erasure. It was about reclaiming space, replacing fear with knowledge, grief with purpose. Back home, Claire, walked through the living room and paused at the mantel. She picked up the photo frame, the one Katherine had placed there just days after their return. It was the same image from the cruise terminal, the last taken before everything changed. We were so happy, Claire said, brushing her thumb across her father's face. He really loved us, didn't he? Katherine stepped beside her. He died protecting you. That's all you need to know. Claire nodded. I wish I could remember more of him clearly, but I know he's a part of me. She looked down at the legal envelope in her hands and opened it. Inside was her new, or rather original, identity document. Claire Wilson, she read aloud. It's strange to see it written again. Katherine placed a hand on her shoulder. That name never stopped being yours. They just tried to take it away, but they didn't win. Claire's eyes didn't water, but something softened in her expression. Then I'll carry it now. For him. For us. She placed the photo back with care, then sat on the couch. The therapist said I should create a routine, she added, so I start volunteering on Monday. That's wonderful, Katherine replied, sitting beside her. At the center? Claire nodded. They have this peer mentoring group, Survivors Helping Survivors. They asked if I'd speak next month. I said yes. Katherine watched her for a long moment. You don't have to push yourself too fast, she said gently. Healing isn't a race. Claire looked at her steady. I'm not doing it to prove anything. I want to help someone like me get out a little sooner. If someone had said the right thing to me, maybe I wouldn't have stayed trapped so long. Inside my head, I mean. Not just the places they took me. Katherine nodded, pride quietly blooming inside her. Then say the right things now. You have the voice they tried to bury. Use it. Claire leaned her head briefly against her mother's shoulder. It was a rare gesture of closeness, but one that no longer felt forced. For years, they'd been two halves separated by time, distance, and pain. Now they were rediscovering the language of belonging. Not all at once, but piece by piece, the gap was closing. The next morning, as Katherine poured coffee in the kitchen, she heard footsteps behind her. Claire entered wearing a hoodie with a small logo that read, "Free Haven, Recovery Through Community." Katherine turned, surprised. "You're up early," she said. Claire shrugged. "I slept okay. First time in a while." Katherine smiled. "Want breakfast?" Claire nodded. "Toast. And eggs if it's not too much trouble." It was the simplest exchange, yet for Katherine it meant everything. She handed Claire a plate and sat at the table as they ate together in silence. No tension, no sadness, just quiet normalcy. After a while, Claire spoke. "I think I want to finish school, eventually. GED or something." Katherine raised an eyebrow, but her smile grew. "You can do whatever you want now, and I'll help. However I can." Claire picked at her toast. "I'm scared sometimes that I'll forget how to be normal, that people will always look at me and see a victim." Katherine leaned forward. "Then remind them who you are, over and over, until that's all they can see." Claire looked at her mother for a moment, then whispered, "Thanks for not giving up." Katherine didn't answer right away. She just reached out and took her hand. Later that day, they walked downtown together. Claire stopped occasionally to scan store windows, street names, and even the cafe where her photo had once been taped beside dozens of others. That wall was now empty, cleaned, repainted, and bearing a new plaque in honor of the lost and those who found their way back. Claire stared at it for a long time. "Do you think people really change?" she asked. Katherine followed her gaze. "Yes, I think people survive, and that survival changes them. It doesn't mean they're broken, just different." Claire turned toward her. "I'm different now." Katherine nodded, "but not lost." Claire reached into her bag and pulled out the rolled poster from earlier. She didn't say anything, just placed it gently inside the donation bin. Set up by the new trafficking task force, it would be archived, stored with the records of other recovered individuals. A closing chapter, a kept promise. As they walked on, Katherine felt her daughter's hand brush against hers. This time it was Claire who initiated the contact. No words, just the warmth of reconnection. Quiet, unforced, real. That evening, Claire stood in her room, sorting through a box of old keepsakes Katherine had kept sealed for years. Inside were drawings, report cards, birthday cards signed by Ethan. She unfolded a page titled, "When I Grow Up," written in shaky, third-grade handwriting. "I want to help people who are sad. I want to be a friend. I want to be a hero like my mom and dad." Claire stared at the page for a long time. She didn't cry. Instead, she added it to her new folder, the one she was building for her volunteer work. "I guess I always knew who I wanted to be," she murmured. When Katherine walked in and saw her, she smiled. "You found the paper," she said. Claire nodded. "I'm going to keep it. It reminds me of the girl I was." Katherine stepped closer. "And the woman you're becoming." For the first time in years, Claire felt peace. Not because everything was resolved, but because she was finally present in her own story again. Not as Tracy, not as Lola, but as Claire Wilson, a survivor, a daughter, a future. As night fell, Katherine placed 2 mugs of tea on the coffee table and joined Claire on the couch. "How's it feel?" she asked. "Being home." Claire looked around the room at the new photo of just the 2 of them now hanging beside the old one. "Strange, good, quiet." She paused, then added, "Safe." Katherine wrapped an arm around her, and this time Claire leaned in fully. "You don't have to be okay every day." Katherine whispered. But every day you're here, you're healing. That's enough. Claire nodded. I want to live. I want to choose things now. What I wear, what I say, who I am. Katherine squeezed her. Then start tomorrow. Start small, but start. Claire smiled, the gesture still shy, still learning. Its place, but it was there. And that was everything. The woman the world had buried under new names, new chains, new countries, was alive again. And her name was Claire Wilson. With heartfelt care and dedication, we at Destino Narrado created this story, thinking of you. Someone who values deep emotional journeys that truly touch the heart. Every video we share is crafted with attention to detail and respect for the strength and pain behind real-life stories like Claire's. If this story moved you in any way, please tell us in the comments. What did it make you feel or reflect on? We read every message with care, and your voice truly matters to us. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Your support helps us keep bringing stories like this to life with the care and depth you deserve. Here at Destino Narrado, we believe that real stories have the power to heal, inspire, and bring people closer. And if you'd like to feel more, explore the other videos we've shared. There are many powerful journeys waiting for you. Thank you so much for being with us, and we'll see you in the next story.